Well, welcome in. I guess we got Mike. I can't hear.
Are we all coming?
Welcome.
Okay.
Excuse me? It's not on?
Yeah, so I came dressed like this to some green room with John Meacham in New York. And he said, "Are those your new media?"
Yeah, that's the Morning Joe outfit.
Yeah, he said,
it
"Are
on
those
yet?
your new media jeans?" And I
Can
said,
you
"Well,
hear me
is
now,
that?"
Harry? I don't think we have sound. I don't think we have sound. Oh, we do have. Okay, good. Well, welcome to the Future of Politics. Excuse me? Should I just keep talking or should I quit talking? We got a microphone now. Donna, you don't have to run and break a leg here, okay? We don't need a comp claim. Welcome to the Future of Politics panel, which Pandora Internet Radio is sponsoring. A couple housekeeping matters before we begin. I want to remind you that we have our online foundation silent auction going on. Please go and bid and buy something to help the foundation. All the proceeds are going to student scholarships. In addition to that, Pandora has also put up an AAPC radio station. It's on our website. You can go there and find it. It's got, for all of us political junkies, it's got what we love to hear, which is music from political campaigns for the past 20 years. And you'll have some exciting memories when you listen to it. I enjoyed it earlier. It's my pleasure to present to you the Vice President of Advertising Sales for Pandora Internet Radio, Sean Duggan. Sean?
Thanks, Dale. Okay.
Oh, you don't have a mic.
Thanks. Can I stand up here? Thanks. Thanks. Hold this, I guess. Thanks, Dale. We're really excited to be the sponsor of the Future of Politics panel. You know, when we looked at what we could be involved with and sponsor, this was definitely the one that jumped out at us. You know, we were, to give you an idea of Pandora, I'll just kind of like try to look through the lights for a second. Who's a Pandora user out there? Okay, number one, thank you. You're the reason I have a job, so really important. When we looked at, the future of politics and what Charlie, Howard, and Stephanie are going to be up here talking about in a few minutes, what I thought it would be helpful and interesting to share with you guys today is, what's happened. We feel like at Pandora we've had a window seat to some of the huge changes that are happening in media in the world today. To think, for perspective, in 2008, and I just saw about 80% of the hands in here went up when I asked that question. In 2008, we were a niche music service. Relatively small, skewing very young, meaning college students, early adopters. Today, we reach, and I'll skip through to a few slides here to show you where we are. This is our numbers as of last month, 67 million active users. And to talk about, I worked in radio a long time at ABC, some great brands. We used to brag about 3 or 4 hours a week of listening. On average, we're averaging about 2 hours per day per user. Pretty phenomenal growth. And what we're really drafting off of is a macro trend of, what's happening in terms of how people are consuming media. When you think about Pandora, a lot of folks still think of like, well, Pandora, that's cool to put on your buy. Like in 2012, kind of our assumption on the way in is it'd be great to get on some national campaigns, meaning the presidential, and we did. I have Stephanie to thank for that, and her team. But what we thought we'd do some state level. The amazing thing that was really surprising to us is to see that we were doing stuff with assembly candidates, municipal candidates, way down ballot, and not only helping them like in terms of being a vanity buy, meaning a part of something that's cool to add to the plan. But as you can see here, these numbers are actually as of March. We're the largest radio station in LA. I still am kind of surprised when I see this slide. To think just a couple of years ago we were a niche music service, and a month ago we were working with the top 2 candidates for the mayoral election of LA during a primary. It's really one of these things that I still feel like it's an aha moment for people when they first see it. Not only are we number 1, but like this is 18 plus. If you were to look at a younger demo, 18 to 34, 18 to 24, we would be 2 times the second station in terms of rating. Another thing that came up a lot during a lot of the sessions is the value of the Hispanic voters, and I'm sure our panelists are going to talk about that as one of the huge trends that's happening. If you were to look for just Hispanic users, 1 in 4 Hispanics are Pandora users now. In LA, we're the largest Hispanic station in the market. Another kind of really surprising insight, and what we're thinking about is like, okay, how do we bring this to campaigns, advocacy groups, to let them know? Because a lot of you, as you guys just proved, are Pandora users. Common question, Dale, I think last year when I was in Austin, I was the sole representative. I was basically walking around Austin with a sandwich board saying, I'm from Pandora. And the common response was, I love Pandora. What are you doing here? And it was like, I was like, you know what? Tell me about what you're trying to reach consumers. And I think Jim Margolis nailed it earlier today. Unfortunately, I missed this session, but I think the question was, why aren't you buying more radio? And Jim answered, I think pretty directly, we're buying where they are. We're buying Pandora, which again is a privilege for us. But what we really think is like what we did almost 200 campaigns last year in 2012. To give you perspective, 2010 we ran 4. So what we see is we're just scratching the surface, and what we want to do is really help you guys figure it out as we go forward. The taxonomy of how Pandora works, this is another thing that when we shared this with consultants last year in Austin, they were like, do you know how valuable this is? Virtually every ad, when you sign up for Pandora, we ask 4 questions. We ask your age, gender, zip code, and email. With that information and the other information we're adding on, not only can we add scale, but like, for example, the mayor's race of LA that we're working on, I'll be in LA a few weeks from now, we're going down to the zip code, targeting those specific Hispanic zip codes. They'll hear one message. Another part of LA will hear just targeted to male, completely different copy. That's the kind of targeting that we see. As a lot of people talk about the future, it's what we're doing today. This is the year of mobile. I felt like that was the train that was coming into the station for the last decade. Everybody's like, this is going to be the year of mobile. I think I heard it 2006 forward. The good news, I don't have to say that again, this is the year of mobile. It happened. 65% of the campaigns that ran with us last year ran on mobile. And an interesting dynamic was, it was usually dragging the campaign media buying firm. They would say, Sean or Rena, who I see in the back, our director, they would say, we want, Sean, give us Ohio audience. We want Columbus and Cincinnati. We want adults 18 plus. Give us everything you got, but we only want web. Okay, just to be clear, I just want to read this back to you. The Obama campaign has bought all of our audience on mobile and web, but you'll be okay with just 20% of our audience just on web. And they're like, okay, you know what? Just give us the whole plan, and then we'll take a look at that. The other interesting dynamic is after we got campaigns live, we did a lot of video, much more video than we thought, which probably is not surprising to you guys just because of the value of television in terms of political elections. But the other dynamic was we would launch video on web and mobile, and we would always have that same kind of spirited discussion when we were nailing down the media plan, saying, okay, we'll take the mobile. And then I would remember a frequent email would be from Alan Silber, who I don't think is here, but Rena would be in the back. We'd see something from the campaign manager seeing a week of our delivery or 2 weeks, and the phone call would come, can we move every impression to just mobile? The performance and engagement was through the roof. We were averaging almost a 5% click-through rate in engagement on video. So again, amazing learning, totally surprising to us, but really powerful as you guys think about next year. List building, the last 2 things I want to leave you with is, this mobile device is something which, I think we haven't even scratched the surface of the potential here. Today, 75% of the users we sign up will be on mobile devices. We can capture them. This is an example of what's running right now in Virginia. We have their email. One tap, they can say, you know what, you have my email on file, give it to the McAuliffe campaign. I want to get involved. I want to volunteer, or I want to make a call right now. The immediacy of getting involved is now one click away. Just think about the potential here as you guys plan out your strategies for advocacy campaigns this year, and more importantly, 2014. What's next? The last thing I want to leave you with is, our kind of assumption was this is our first time through an election cycle. My first idea was like I'd be able to actually disappear and go surfing in Costa Rica this year in 2013. After we hit our goal and had a great 2012. The reality is a lot of people who tested us in 2012 saw great results, and they're now weaving us into advocacy campaigns. We have approximately 1 million listeners who we've just commissioned to studies with Erdos and Morgan, showing that we're reaching influencers. So this is a campaign that we launched in December for Fix the Debt. We can help you reach 1 million listeners literally while they're on the Capitol Hill, at their desk or at the gym. So again, tremendous value. We look forward to working with you on this and other initiatives. The last thing I just want to say is kind of wrap up and introduce Amy is thank you. We consider ourselves a newcomer, a big newcomer to the political and advocacy realm. We're really excited about what's next, and we also want to thank everybody who sent in an application and the award winners for best use of Pandora Poly Award, which is going to be given out tonight. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce our great moderator, who's going to be joining and kicking things off in a few minutes. Amy Walter is the national editor of the Cook Political Report. She's the former political director for ABC News. She's a frequent guest on PBS and a regular panelist on Washington Week with Gwen Ifill. And she's also been named one of DC's top 50 journalists. Please offer up a warm welcome for Amy Walter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hi. We were just saying maybe we should have brought drinks down for everybody. That's happening afterwards, right? I think that should be part of it. Well, thank you all for being here, and I have the pleasure of moderating a panel today of some of the smartest, most plugged-in folks in politics. We're going to just talk amongst ourselves and involve you guys as well about where politics goes now post-2012, what the future is, and I guess I'm going to give them their introduction and let them wander in like those CNN debates. I wish we had nicknames for them so they could come on with the big music, but we don't. Instead, I will just read a little bit about them and let them come on in. So sitting closest to me is Charlie Black, who's the chairman of Prime Policy Group and was the founder of the firm's predecessor, BKSH and Associates Worldwide. I know Charlie Black from the fact that he's worked on, seems to me, thousands of Republican political campaigns. Very key figure in the McCain 2008 campaign. Person who will be sitting next to him is Stephanie Cutter. You all probably saw her a great deal in the last election on television, or anytime you opened your iPad, there she was on videos created by the Obama campaign. She was the former deputy campaign manager for the Obama 2012. She was also the communications director on the John Kerry campaign in 2004, and she is the founder of the Cutter Media Group. And then finally, we have wearing his best new media jeans and new media glasses, I'm very jealous, is Howard Feynman from AOL Huffington Post Media Group. I still think that he's with Newsweek, so I'm glad that I read this. Editorial director of the AOL Huffington Post Media Group. You see him constantly on NBC and MSNBC. And so, yes, he started, I can't believe that it's been since 2010 as political editor over at the Huffington Post. So please help me in welcoming our panel. They do look good. Oh, that was your cue, the music. You're winning from Pandora. All right. So now that I have you here, I might as well ask you some questions. about what you think
Great.
about elections going forward. I think that's what we're supposed to solve, is the future of elections. So we have about 45 minutes to solve all of the problems of campaigns and figure out what we're going to look for in 2014 and 2016. And Stephanie, I'm going to start this one with you because the story of the Obama campaign has been distilled by many in the media as a story of technology triumphing over everything else, right? You had the data nerds, you have all the stories written about how successful you were in using social networking, how terrible Republicans were. But I wonder what, in your job was in many ways to drive a narrative, to put a message out of the campaign. What does technology and data mean now in these campaigns? And what about the traditional mainstream media folks? How do they fit into this if really the whole New World Order is just targeting through Facebook? Why do you even need to get on television or talk to anybody in the mainstream press?
Well, in terms of what technology means for campaigns, technology is a tool through which you can just do your job better, no matter what it is, whether it's buying advertising, communicating through media, or going door to door. It just makes you better at what you do because you know exactly who you're talking to, how to reach them, and through which means they want to be reached. And that's really how the Obama campaign used technology in every single aspect of any outward-facing department on the campaign. We used technology and the data that we were constantly collecting and analyzing to make sure that, you know, if we were placing ads, we were placing them on the TV shows that our targeted voters, our persuadable voters were watching. So we were optimizing how we were spending our ad dollars. If the president was doing an interview on a local TV station, we knew that that TV station, the people watching it were our majority persuadable voters, otherwise he wouldn't be doing the interview. Going door to door, we were able to bring our on the ground operation online so that if they, you know, if somebody was knocking on the door, they knew who that person was, how they had last voted, the issues that they're concerned about, what the last contact was, whether that person has been active, whether they're registered to vote, whether, you know, every single piece of information that allowed us to figure out that person's support score and how much contact we had to have with them to ensure that they came out to vote. That altogether does not create a message for the campaign or a narrative for the campaign. That has to be candidate driven, really. Right. And you know, you can test that all you want, and we did a lot of testing. We did traditional battleground testing, state-specific testing, and then we had our own analytic testing on a nightly basis, where that message was constantly being tested and minorly tweaked. But let's face it, the president has had the same message since really he spoke at the convention in 2004. So technology is a means through which you just do everything better and more efficiently. But the substance of the campaign, the narrative of the campaign, and most importantly of the candidate, has to be wholly different. You know, that sits above all of that technology. Right. For mainstream media, now, mainstream media absolutely plays a role in elections. They still are an independent fact check on what campaigns do. You know, lots of information that was introduced in this last campaign. You know, not much new could be said about the president, but obviously there was lots of things that voters were learning about Mitt Romney. Having that come from independent media was so much more powerful than anything we could put on the air. Now we would take what, you know, showed up in independent media and put it on the air. But a lot of the investigative reporting, fact-checking, all of that is an incredibly powerful tool in elections. And you know, as technology, Facebook, social media, online media, that's all growing, and everybody has to adjust their tactics and adjust their business plan to meet that need. But the majority of Americans still get their news from the news media. You know, that over time is going to continue to change, but that's, you know, that role hasn't changed. We, you know, this past election, we were better at figuring out how, you know, quite frankly, to go around media, whether it was through Facebook. You know, we had 33 million friends of Barack. If we counted all of our Facebook platforms, we had about 45 million. They were friends with 90% of every American Facebook user.
That's
so just
amazing.
using that resource alone,
amazing.
it was incredibly valuable because it was peer-to-peer communicating. But it allowed us, you know, and everything you do on Facebook is largely positive. That's the type of conversation that's largely had on that type of social media. But, you know, we could drive a positive narrative of something the president was doing that day, a policy that was announced, an anniversary that was being had, an accomplishment on Facebook, which the friends of Barack would take that and communicate with their friends. And that just, in terms of qualitative, it was so much more qualitative in terms of a type of communication than anything that we could have done on our own. You know, so campaigns and media are constantly adjusting every campaign cycle. There's a new technology, there's a new mode of communication, and just as we're constantly adjusting and learning and growing, the media has to also.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with everything Stephanie said. I know that might surprise you, but they won and I lost. She's right about the use of technology and about how the narrative and the message and the driving the message is still necessary by the candidate and the spokespeople for the campaign, of which Stephanie was the best. But here's the thing, the mainstream media is still important, but the mainstream media has changed. And the importance of different outlets has changed. As we sit here today for political coverage, the Huffington Post and Politico are more important than the New York Times and the Washington Post. Do not tell Dan Baltz I said that. But nevertheless, it's true. It's true. We used to say, well, the TV networks all got up in the morning, read the New York Times, and went out and decided what to cover. Now they get up in the morning and read online Politico and the Huffington Post and the you know, tremendous, I mean, the volume of things that you guys put out is amazing, and then decide what to cover. And television news is of less importance than it used to be, but it's still important to the older generations. And the fact that the younger generations are getting their news online from the Huffington Post and a wide variety of news outlets, it's still news, it's still mainstream press.
Well, and Howard, you came from old line, Newsweek, newspapers, and now your new media.
Thus the gene.
Thus the jeans and the new glasses. So what did you see over this time? And then where are we going to be in 2016? What is campaign coverage going to look like? Is everybody just going to have they'll still be the big ones, but then you'll have a blog that becomes new and hot and that may go away and a new thing comes up? And
Well, the first thing is I was originally thinking that I would disagree with your premise about narrative,
okay.
which is a much used word, you know,
Yes.
narrative in the campaign. And I was going to maybe argue that narrative doesn't really matter anymore, especially in a re-election campaign. As Stephanie said, everybody knew Barack Obama. They knew his narrative.
Donald Trump told us we didn't know everything.
I know.
So
But then I got to thinking about my favorite college basketball team, the Louisville Cardinals, and what happened last week when they were playing the game. The whole world watched, or seemingly the whole world watched, as Kevin Ware went up to try to block a three-point shot and broke his leg in a hideous, unforgettable fashion in front of tens of millions of people on television. That then became the biggest story in sports, to the point where the day before yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, all three cable news channels carried Kevin Ware's press conference live.
Yep.
This is an obscure sophomore basketball player who wasn't even a starter on the Louisville team, but the narrative of his life suddenly took over the media. So I'm not going to challenge your premise.
Oh, thank you, Kevin Ware.
Narrative does matter. The story, especially in a presidential campaign,
Especially.
the narrative matters. And the narrative is still necessary, as Stephanie said, to marry with peer-to-peer communication about policy, about accomplishments, about the opponent, but also fitting all of that into the narrative, which in Obama's case was I still have a lot of work to do, but I'm going in the right direction. So you have to have both, and narrative does still matter. As far as the future is concerned, distinctions between what used to be called the mainstream media, the liberal mainstream media, to use the extra word, and other parts of the mainstream media makes the term, that old use of the term, obsolete. Fox is very important. The old notion that it was all a liberal establishment is gone. Fox is crucial. Rupert Murdoch is crucial, and so forth. That's number one. Number two, the distinction between old media and new media is almost functionally obsolete as well. Some of the biggest online news sites that we compete with at the Huffington Post come out of old media operations, like the New York Times, for example. And they're rapidly moving as fast as they can in that direction. Meanwhile, we at the Huffington Post, which started out 7 years ago at a dinner party at Ariana's home in Huffington's home in Brentwood, and which originally had virtually no reporters of its own, we now have one of the biggest news bureaus, print news bureaus in town. We've got 30 people in our bureau in Washington. Wow. So there's this sort of this grand convergence as everybody rushes into the digital world. To me, the most interesting one statistic in the Pew study that came out last fall, and I have it here somewhere, is that that people under 30 spend more time on social media than they do with any form of news gathering. This was a study of where people get their news, but Pew also pointed out that for people under 30, engaging in the digital world or even the old media world, if you put all that together, they spend more time in social media than all other forms, than all news media combined. And that's why it was so important that the Obama campaign did what it did through Facebook. They did a tremendous amount of advertising also on web pages and so forth. I think where we're headed in 2016 is a further evolution. I think that by 2016, a majority of Americans will get most of their news online. It's still not quite there yet, but by 2016, that will definitely be the case. The Huffington Post is now the largest, by some measures, the largest news site on the web in the United States, not counting Yahoo, which is trying to become a news site itself.
Right. That's right.
So that's where it's all headed.
Thank you. Charlie and Stephanie, I want to start with you and talk about primaries for a second, because it's becoming very clear that again, traditionally the focus was on the general election. We wanted to know who was going to face whom, and that was really where the press was spending most of their time. It's pretty clear that the primaries now are setting up the fight more than anything, and that these decisions about what you say and where you play and how you perform in the primaries may have more influence even than what you do in a general election. And I'm just wondering, again, if we look to 2016, think about the role that the Iowas and New Hampshires and South Carolinas play, talking about the role of social media now, talking about candidates who've been able to build their own organization outside of the traditional campaign organizations, whether we're going to see a real challenge to the system that has been in place, or whether we're going to go back and we're still all going to show up in Iowa and watch the caucus results and then go to New Hampshire.
It's not going to change. It'll still be Iowa, New Hampshire, in our case, South Carolina, and Florida. And both parties will have open contests for the nomination.
Is that a good thing, though?
Well, I'm not sure if it's like Churchill said about democracy. It's a terrible system. It's just better than every other one. I don't know how you change it. Both parties have been studying this for 30 years, including meeting together to talk about, synchronizing a new primary schedule, and it just doesn't work because Iowa and New Hampshire have so much clout within the parties because they've been building it for years just on this one issue, let us go first. I think it'll be the same system. Sometimes we move the calendar around, but it's still Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida. I will tell you this, that one of the biggest nuisances in the history of American politics, the Ames Iowa straw poll, that we've had to endure for a long time is gone.
It's now dead.
That's over.
It's dead.
And that'll help our candidates not have to squander a lot of money and time just on that meaningless straw poll. The thing that will change, I think, in both parties is the number of debates. I can't tell exactly how it's going to be adjusted, but one of our goals, the Republican National Committee and Chairman Priebus, is to try to figure out a way to limit us to 8 or 10 presidential primary debates, so you don't spend the whole year, twice a month, beating the hell out of each other. And I suspect
You just got to get
guys
the candidates to agree to that.
Well, I think we can, if we start early enough, we can be persuasive. But what did,
We've tried it.
yeah, Obama and
And
Clinton
it
had
worked.
20.
It worked in part because
In
there were
part.
strong candidates.
Right, where if others weren't signing on, then
Correct.
they just weren't getting paid
Correct.
attention to. I think that the primary caucus system, it's definitely not going to change in 2016 because it would have, that process would have had to have been done 2 years ago for it to be ready.
But do you think
for
candidates will
2016.
treat them differently in the sense
I-
of I'm going to just
I think-
bypass Iowa, forget it.
I don't
can't
think
win.
that's ever been proven to be successful for anybody. I do think that candidates going into it have to keep in mind how they're going to emerge from it. And, you know, a case study is actually Mitt Romney,
Yep.
how he conducted himself through the Republican primaries. Most of our negative against him was because of things that he said in the primary, specifically for very important demographics, Hispanic Americans, women, young people. Much of what we used against him was things that he got locked into in the primary because he was running to the right to win the nomination. I think if you compare that to 2008, and you know, obviously I may be a little biased here, but I've also studied it. You know, President Obama didn't run to the left through those primaries. That was a hell of a long primary, just as long as the Republicans won this last time. Hard fought, but then Senator Obama and then Senator Clinton didn't run to the left to try to win that primary. I mean, it was a hard-fought contest based on sheer determination and skill, not who was going to be more progressive than the other. And that was because, you know, these were two very big candidates who were looking towards the future and knew that they couldn't run to the left if they wanted to win the presidency. I think anybody running in this next round, anybody you know, I think this will be most watched on the Republican side because that'll be their best opportunity to take back the White House. I think they would be smart to make sure that they don't change or calculate going through those primaries to win some votes to get the nomination that will come back and hit them in the face in the general. I also think that, you know, Amy, you asked about whether, you know, the party still has a role to play in this. Absolutely they do. And yes, there are outside organizations. We have OFA now. I'm on the board of OFA. But the DNC still plays a significant role in candidate recruitment and party building. You know, I would hope that the RNC is picking up the ball for data analytics now while they're waiting for a candidate. You know, that's what we did in 2005 after we lost the Kerry campaign. That's where we started all of our aggressive data collection, which became the data that we used in 2008 and enhanced and on steroids in 2012. So a lot of that groundwork can be done by a party in terms of, you know, supporting your candidate's agenda, doing the groundwork that your candidate can't do when they're running for a nomination, party building, putting frameworks and grassroots in place so that when there is a nominee, they can pick that up and run with it.
Howard?
Well, now let's see if I have this right. I think in 2008, on the Republican side, John McCain did
Basically skip Iowa.
skip Iowa, and he did win, and he did.
You didn't skip Iowa?
We set foot in Iowa at least once every other month. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
all right. And they won the nomination. I think it's two different things with the two different parties at this stage in history. The Democrats in Iowa, for the most part, internally agree on most things. As Stephanie said, the race between then Senator Obama and Hillary Clinton was not really easy to define ideologically. As a matter of fact, as you recall, Obama sort of ran, quote, to the right of Hillary.
It was more old
on
versus
healthcare.
new, generational.
Yeah, it was a generational thing, but it wasn't so.
In Iraq.
In Iraq, but it wasn't that ideological. On the Republican side, it is. Now, most agree But there is this maybe phantom thought that, number one, either you can make a daring play on the Republican side and get people to go to the caucus who, you know, aren't the most conservative or not. I mean, I would think that, let's say Hillary's going to run. Well, first of all, I'm assuming that Iowa's going to remain important. I think it's interesting to play the thought game about it. If Hillary does run, I assume she goes out there and it's a triumphant victory tour. I'm assuming. I'm not even sure who would challenge her out there. So she's got no reason not to do it, just to put her stamp on the thing from the very beginning and win something that she lost last time. Because once Obama got inside position on her in Iowa, it was really functionally all over. And by the way, to me it was fascinating that the caucus system, talk about peer-to-peer. I mean, the caucus system was made for the type of campaign you guys were running. And in a way, the fact that you had to organize so deeply for Iowa helped your whole campaign because it gave you the organizational template for the whole rest of it. On the Republican side, I do think that somebody like Chris Christie could just say, you know, to hell with Iowa. To hell with it.
Sure.
And he's got enough charisma, if he runs, and enough sort of star power and media traction that he doesn't have to go. And I think that would then make Iowa a sort of play-in game for the rest of the schedule Charlie's talking about.
Two quick points. You've got to win Iowa or New Hampshire or you're out of the race. It's true in both parties.
I agree.
McCain, we knew we weren't going to win Iowa. We didn't want to be accused of writing it off, so we did do
You just set your expectations.
some minimal effort there. But you know, everybody knew McCain had to win New Hampshire or he was dead. Christie could say the same thing. I'm putting everything on New Hampshire. But just one other point is McCain in 08 was he's a conservative, but he was the most moderate of all the candidates. And without changing his positions or I mean, he was sitting there negotiating an immigration deal with Teddy Kennedy in between going back and forth in New Hampshire. But he came through that. You know, he didn't have to moderate.
That was all pre-Tea Party. Could he do that now?
Yeah, but that also hurt McCain.
There's mostly the same voters.
That hurt McCain, though. That hurt his, you know, he still won more Hispanic votes than Mitt Romney did. And, you know, there are many in the Hispanic communities that had an affection for him because what he had done for immigration. But when he ran away from immigration, through many of those primaries, that hurt his, not just his narrative with the Hispanic Americans, but his overarching narrative with everybody, that he wasn't this straight talk politician, that he was as calculating as the next one.
Well, I won't debate it with you, but I'm not sure how bad it hurt him with the rest of the public. I mean, you guys outspent us 10-1 on Hispanic media. That's why you didn't get a very big percentage of the Hispanic vote. But the point is that McCain was still McCain, and he managed to get nominated. So you don't necessarily have to run
move over to the
left or the right, respectively, to get nominated. And we were doing just fine until Lehman Brothers went under, and you know the rest of that story. We were competitive.
Well, I want to see if anybody has, I have a couple more questions, but wanted to open it up for you all. You can just stand up and.
Hi. Is there in the 2012 election, like you said, you mentioned earlier, like Lehman Brothers collapse, that was kind of like a defining moment, and you knew it was like effectively over at that point. Was there one moment, be it like strategy inspired or something out of your control, that really decided last year's election, in your opinion?
Did y'all catch that, or do you want me to repeat it?
We heard it.
We heard it.
All right, cool.
Do you want, I'll take a first crack at it. There was nothing, you know, I disagree partially of what Charlie said, that after Lehman Brothers, it was over. It was a close race going into September in 2008, but we had the momentum. We were on a trajectory. But it was close, absolutely. It was closer than it was in the 2012 race at that point. In 2012, the defining moments didn't change the direction of the race. You know, this was a close race, but as of June of 2012, we had a very high probability of winning. Even if you look at 538 or other independent aggregator sites, it was well over 60% at that point. Nothing really shifted that. There were moments, you know, the first debate probably being the biggest, that gave Romney some moments of momentum. But the gap never closed enough for him to overtake us. It was an incredibly stable race. It would shift a point up, a point down, but it was largely an incredibly stable race once the two were matched as nominees. You know, there were things that happened in the race that definitely shifted the narrative, you know, impacted favorabilities, but not the head-to-head. You know, the 47% tape, I think, hurt Romney with his own supporters, not our supporters, and independents didn't really move. But with his own supporters and Republican-leaning independents, they came back to him after the first debate. You know, some people think that the hurricane had an impact on the results. I don't. I think that Romney peaked well before the hurricane, and he was on a steady decline. Well before 2 weeks of the hurricane hit. So I don't think that impacted the results of the race at all. I think at that point, most people had made up their minds. I don't know.
Any additions?
I think the only there's sort of reverse impact moments, as Stephanie was saying. Any chance that Romney might have had to mount some kind of challenge that would change the narrative kept getting beaten down by various outside events. Yeah. I think the most important of which was the 47% video, which is a classic combination of, quote, old media and new media, both viral and national. And it was, I think, while it didn't move any numbers, it was pretty devastating.
Yeah, and you know, what the hurricane did was freeze the race for 5 of the last 9 days. And Romney actually had a pretty good message going, and going into that Sunday, hadn't moved numbers yet, but I thought we had a chance to seize the momentum in the last week, but boom, Romney's off the radar screen for 5 days, and if it didn't change the numbers, it left him behind when the hurricane episode was over.
Is there somebody in the back there? I thought somebody was standing up. Does anyone want to go ask your question?
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question about sort of the marriage of technology and narrative or message. So all of the campaigns that you're talking about are sort of obviously big budget campaigns where you had the opportunity to communicate through multiple mediums and screens and be everywhere. And I think that it's tempting oftentimes for campaigns or candidates to change or sort of specialize a message or a narrative based on micro-targeting or placement. And the scary part in my mind about that is if you dilute a message too much, are you going to off-message that you don't have an overarching sort of narrative that you're telling anymore? So do you find that you're sort of micro-targeting your narrative with your placement, or you're sort of just changing other pieces of your communication, whether it be imagery or length or time, things like that? So can you talk a little bit about sort of being true to your narrative in the new world of micro-targeted mediums?
Sure, I'll take, you can't change your narrative, regardless of who you're talking to. And you know, a couple of examples of our micro-targeting, and I'm sure you've heard from lots of people from the Obama campaign through the course of this conference, but just a couple of examples. We ran a women's track from May through the election, and the women's track was women's advertising, online, on air, significant social media pushes, launch of on-the-ground campaigns for women. All of that messaging it moved women, but it also would have moved men, and it would be the exact same thing we'd say regardless of any audience. It was part of the president's stump speech.
Stephanie, were the ads, so the ads themselves, the content of the ads weren't.
It was a matter of emphasis.
Was not different.
Well, no, it was a matter of emphasis on the issue. So, for instance, contraception obviously was a big issue, particularly for younger women. So our ads would be, you know, the larger forward versus back narrative that we were pushing as part of the choice in the campaign. But the example of forward versus back was Romney's opposition to the contraception rule, or the president passing health care reform, which allows women to have access to the health care that they need. That's absolutely consistent with the president's narrative in any medium. So it's actually important. Dilution, I would flip that and say you're looking for saturation. And micro-targeting allows you to get to reach saturation because you're figuring out what issues wrapped up in your larger message moves people, and through which medium they want to hear it. And that's really how micro-targeting works. For Hispanics, and I'm sure you've heard this from many Obama people over the course of this conference also, obviously the economy was an important message for every voter, but as a proof point in that economic messaging, healthcare was the most powerful for Hispanic voters. And because it showed a number of different things. One, that the president was on their side, he was solving a problem they cared most about, but it had a direct impact on their economics of their families.
And this was on Spanish language television.
And it was Spanish language.
That's the key.
But we knew early on, before I left the White House, that healthcare was the #1 mover of Hispanic voters, not immigration. There was a time that the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War were big issues in that community, but healthcare was the prime mover. But what he was talking, in those Spanish language advertising, and we used, the president did some to-camera Spanish language, but it was mostly people in their communities that were appearing on TV talking about what the president had done for them. And it was largely a positive message in that advertising. But how they were talking about healthcare and how they were talking about the president was absolutely consistent with every other mode of communication that we had to every audience. So micro-targeting doesn't mean you're changing your message, you're just being a little bit more specific with that audience.
All right. There's somebody right up here in the front.
Hi, Marty Stone with Stone's
Phones.
Phones.
Marty. Hi.
See you, Amy. In 4 years, how important is the success of Obamacare or the derailment of Obamacare by Republican governors going to be in the presidential election?
Charlie Howard, you want to
Well,
start?
I think it's going to be very important. I think the economy will be the biggest issue, as it usually is, but connected to that is how well Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, sorry, Stephanie.
We call it Obamacare.
That's right, I heard
That's
him
right.
say
Yeah,
he
you
didn't
embrace
mind calling
it.
it Obamacare, but how well it's being implemented and how successful it is. There's going to be a lot of glitches and delays in this, and it's probably going to be an issue in the 2014 election, but I think the economy plus Obamacare are likely to be huge issues. It's very hard to elect the same party to the White House 3 times in a row. Very hard. And I will say that Hillary Clinton is certainly the front runner to be president, and she is a wonderful candidate and a very accomplished person. But we may well be running a new generation of candidates to see who comes out of our mix, and it could be a generational difference as well as having some of those issues to work with. If the economy's good, she's got a very good chance of being president.
Well, I think, and if I ever had any doubt, which I didn't, Stephanie just confirmed for me that the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, in substantive terms and maybe overall, was the most important factor in getting Barack Obama reelected. I think it was very, very important because it gave the campaign something tangible to take, or something potentially tangible, let's say, especially to those Hispanic voters, but also other struggling middle-class voters and so forth. You could say, look, this is real. I'm doing this for you. And I know that Sergio Ben-Dixon, who did a lot of polling, said early on that was more important to Hispanic voters than anything else. So, but here could be the crushing irony. If the implementation of it gets messed up, which is possible, then Hillary Clinton who was the first to bring up national health care with Bill Clinton back in '93, but who then got outmaneuvered by Barack Obama about it in 2008. And then Barack Obama got reelected on it in 2012. Then Hillary Clinton could come back on the same issue and be having to defend something that she had been working on 20 years earlier. It's fascinating, and I do think it's going to be very important. And where it's headed, I have no earthly idea.
Well, that goes to my question then about legacy overall, that there's obviously an issue legacy, but if you think about the 2012 campaign and the one thing that we got from the 2012 campaign that you think now has set a bar that anybody running in 2014 or 2016 is going to have to hit, what would that be?
Well, for 14, we now have large independent organizations, 527s, who are going to get involved in primaries and make certain that we nominate electable conservatives and not just the most conservative person. The groups that go in and you know, advertise and help what they think is the most conservative person are entitled to do that. I have suggested to them that they use an IQ test in the future, so people have to pass some threshold before they get endorsed by these groups. We will not, this time, I don't think our party will have weak nominees. You know who I'm talking about from the past. In 16, it's also a big question of can the Republican Party catch up technologically with what President Obama and Stephanie and the Democrats so masterfully did. We probably can't catch up completely by then, but we got to get more competitive in the technology and social media space.
Is there anything that you would say, especially thinking about, you ended a 2004 Kerry campaign, and now think about where you were in 2012, 8 years later, what that felt like, and then what it's going to feel like 4 years from now.
I mean, we can predict anything that we want right now, but these things...
We're going to be on the moon, colonies.
Things can move very fast, and I do think the Republican Party can catch up in terms of technology and data collection and making sure that their data can talk to each other so that it allows you to do some predictive modeling and really think about not just where people are now, but where they're likely to go. Much of this depends on the candidate, though. You know, as good as our technology and data were, it was only usable because of our candidate. You know, we knew a lot about people. We know what moved people, but they were only going to come to us if they were receptive to President Obama's record and what they believed in him, what they didn't believe in him, where they thought the country was going under his leadership versus Mitt Romney's leadership. This is very much candidate-driven. So while the Republicans can, invest in data, invest in technology, and we're obviously going to continue doing that too, and trying to figure out what the next iteration of that is, who's at the top of our tickets is going to largely determine.
Well, and to that point, it does seem like there was a traditional old problem, or a problem that is something that we've seen campaigns struggle with from the beginning of time, which for the Romney campaign, I'm curious your take on this, Charlie, which was he never really defined himself, right? The classic strategy in politics is define yourself before your opponent can. And he allowed this opening for whether it was Priorities USA or the president to define him, and he never fought that.
Yeah, the resource difference over the summer, and they wisely defined Romney at a time when we didn't have the money to compete. And I agree with you that he could have been, even through the primaries, having a more consistent presentation of who he was, something a little bit more specific and inspiring than just the economy screwed up, I'm a businessman, I know how to fix it. Certainly we could have done better.
Well, in terms of looking ahead, rather than focusing on the data or the technology or the candidates, because we can't really know, I would say for the landscape by 2016, the question of younger voters and Hispanic voters and the Republican Party, those interrelated questions are just absolutely critical. I thought that the one actually useful and frank passage in that report that the RNC did about itself, about the party, was the one where they said that the issue of same-sex marriage and gay rights more broadly for younger voters is a gateway issue. I think that's the way they put it. And if the Republicans don't figure out how to get around that or get right with that, that the kids, meaning under 30, won't listen to them on the other things. I don't know if you agree with that or not, Charlie, but that's at least what that report said. And the other thing, obviously, is Latino voters. I mean, you can't get the kind of percentage that you got and expect, maybe you'll do okay in 2014, but you're going to get wiped out again in 2016 without changing there somehow. And I don't know how the Republicans are going to do it, but it'll be interesting to watch, and I think those two things will be, to talk about narratives, those will be two of the narratives for the party going, and the presidential race going forward.
All right. Well, oh, there was, okay. Well, you can be our last question.
Just to encapsulate what Howard Fineman just said, as I see it, the Republican Party has a J.C. Penney problem. And what I mean by that is you have all these old customers and you have the future of what could be your voters. And how does the Republican Party reconcile these two very different places to consume politics and to move forward?
Charlie, you get to answer that. It's all on you.
Well,
solve everything.
You know what? We are going to do some big things to try to get into the Latino community and campaign and have our leaders show up. And I mean, not showing up was half the problem. Immigration is a gateway issue there. We're trying to get that off the table in a positive way with Republican support in Congress. But as Stephanie said, the candidates matter here. And if you think about who our candidates might be next time, other than Jeb Bush, it's a new, younger generation of candidates. Candidates who, frankly, most of them know how to campaign like populists. And they won't be the least bit afraid of going into the Latino community or the African American community or to young people and campaigning and stating their case. So even if it looked like we had a candidate in their 40s who was taking the older generation for granted, but working hard on these other constituencies, that'd be better than the opposite.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here. Dale, I don't know if you want to close us out, but I want to thank the panel for being here and doing a great job.
We very much appreciate all of you being here. This mic didn't work, so I can't talk.
All right.
We'll see you all at the opening reception. You want to stand up?